politics. How political analysis shapes the future of Europe and the world. Jan ZIELONKA, University of Oxford.
On the 9th of November 1989, I hosted a conference at the University of Leiden with my German colleagues, who became very excited, and we all followed the historical developments in Berlin.
Real walls, not those virtual ones. In fact, I spent a lot of time working on the wall in this city. I crossed it many times. I know how it was. And I try in my work to understand the implications of having this wall here in the center of Europe, dividing the whole world into two very antagonistic camps. When this wall finally collapsed, we thought politics of walls is over. This was, after all, the mother of all walls. Well, we are 30 years after, 29, and what we see? New walls. In Hungary, in Greece, in America, even in Australia. What is going on? You can say, you just had a wrong theory. You were too optimistic. If you look at the history of humanity, it was all about unbounding and rebounding. Think about farmers and hunters, or about settlers and nomads. They all had different vision of territory, identity, authority, and rights. And in fact, you can say the whole history can be reduced to those factors. Well, yes. But does history never change? Don't we have this unprecedented level of interdependence? Has not the internet revolution transformed the world in a global village? You have this beautiful quote from Nobel's speech of Kofi Annan, one of the greatest diplomats of this world. And you understand what I mean. Or you talk to economists. President Trump talked about sanctions towards China. Where comes this Boeing? Where did that come from? And it applies not just to big data, it applies to our life too. How many of you still live in a place, village or city you were born? Raise your hand. How many of you still live exactly in the same place where you were born? Not many. How many of you never studied, I'm going higher, studied or lived or worked in another country? Never. Just went for holidays. How many of you? Never. How many of you, let's say what? How many of you have friends or colleagues from other cultures? How many of you? Well. So something changes here, right? Something changes, and yet, we are being told that borders cause the worst things around. We are being told today by politicians, not just from the right, also from the left, that basically this unbounded or borderless world or Europe generated this enormous inequality. We lost jobs because of this. Or we are being told that it causes or stimulates migrations, which just kills our culture. We are being told that democracy is being eroded, because in a borderless Europe, decisions are being taken by markets or European Commission, right? It doesn't mean, of course, all of this that we who raised our hands because we are so international, we don't have our identity. Of course we have our identity, and we cherish it. But it doesn't mean that we believe that trade is bad for us, doesn't believe that we are racist, doesn't believe that we want to invade other countries, does it? No. As a matter of fact, a century ago, it was like this. But we hope no longer. So what is going on? Why those people who blame borders for everything get more and more voters? Why the populations which voted for liberal ideas of open borders, free trade, just turn their back to the concept? Are they right or wrong? Well, I think they are barking the wrong dog, or wrong tree, I should say even, more precisely. They just misinterpret what is going on here and where are the real causes of the problems we've got. Because we've got a lot of problems. First of all, what I believe, we should blame a little bit our favorite economic paradigm, which destroyed the balance between liberty and equality, which destroyed the balance between private and public sphere, which basically assumed that markets will take care of redistribution, which basically gave premium to competition and forgot about solidarity. This has nothing to do with borders. Migration. Well, what have we done? You know, I remember in Brindisi, Bari, 1991, there was scenes like 2015 in Budapest. So what we have done in the meantime, after enormous migration crisis in early 90s? Well, we reduced development aid to North Africa and Middle East. We basically cut investments there because we thought, well, too unstable. We sold arms to anybody who wanted them. We basically relied on nice guys like this one, or Ben Ali in Tunisia, and another dictator, to keep those migrants there. We then bombed some of those countries, then left them to the local warlords, and then we are surprised we have those desperate people. And we blame open borders for this. These borders were never really open. They were never really welcome. Let's face it. And what about democracy? Are those open borders to be blamed? Or the parties who just totally lost in touch with the electorate, who converse with pollsters but not voters, who treat citizens like consumers, you know, sometimes using even techniques, from supermarkets. Yes, markets really do what they want, but this is because our institutions responsible for regulating markets and disciplining them just basically went along with the markets. Think about the European Commission. They obviously listen more to 30,000 lobbyists in Brussels than the ordinary citizens. How else they would support ACTA 1, ACTA 2? I'm not even talking about fiscal compact. So there are serious reasons to believe that we have to change our policies and not to blame open borders for all these things. Yes, we need to think about borders seriously and talk with our voters about difficult issues of transborder movement of goods, capital, and labor. Nevertheless, what we need to do is try to reinvent our institutions, and particularly try to strengthen public institutions. But those public institutions can no longer be on the level of nation states. Because the world has changed. Because the world is more like this. So if we want really, really to adjust those institutions and make them work for citizens, we have to change this relationship. You remember those concentric circles between territory, authority, rights, and identity? Because something has changed since 19th centuries. And applying 19th century solutions to 21st century solutions doesn't look to me very intelligent. But this is what politicians are talking about. Basically, closing borders to the problem of interdependent world is like applying aspirin for a broken leg or depression. How can you build new walls in a world of mass travel, climate change, cyber security? Please tell me how you do this. I'm not even talking about trade. But we also have to acknowledge our mistakes. Helga Novotny said it perfectly. We have to regain trust of our voters. And in order to do this, we have to acknowledge that we are failing sometimes. And frankly, I work with politicians all my life. I'm not so young. And I never met a politician who was happy to acknowledge his own mistakes. They always blame somebody else. And if they lose elections, they even blame the electorate. So much about democracy. They must have been manipulated. They got mad. No. The things I was talking about were policy mistakes. And somebody has to take responsibility for that. And unlike we make a proper diagnosis what went wrong, we will never regain credibility. We will never get those voters who abandon us. But we also need to give them some vision. It may not be utopia, but we need to give them a sense of direction. We cannot just say, we want the old to come back. That's not enough, particularly for the young population. Because they need some hope. And they deserve better than to live in Europe and the world full of wars. Enough. I finished. Thank you.